Namo Buddhaya, and welcome to the Buddha Dharma TV Saturday program. I am Lisa Chu. Today we will start with a Dharma talk, a Vesak Day special, and another Dharma talk. The Dharma talk today is by Dr. Bhikkhu Bodhi, who is internationally known as a Buddhist scholar from New York. Venerable Bodhi had monastic education under the late Venerable Balan Godar Ananda Mathiara Maha Nayaka Thero in Sri Lanka. We are grateful to the Venerable for sharing with us the Dharma titled, What Makes Life Truly Worthwhile?
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Okay, good afternoon, everybody. First I want to again extend my thanks to Ajahn Pasano for inviting me or requesting me to give the Dhamma talk this afternoon, and also for hosting me at this wonderful monastery for the past 2 weeks. Oh, it's hard to believe that these 2 weeks have gone by so quickly. It seems that I just arrived here and now it's time to depart. And I also want to express my gratitude to all of the lay people whose support, encouragement, dedication has made this Abhayagiri monastery possible, because the Sangha couldn't do it alone without the support of the lay community. So it's that sort of mutual relationship of monastics and the laity that make a monastery spring up and flourish. And so I think that the fact that this monastery has flourished so beautifully over the last few years is testimony both to the skill and vision of Ajahn Pasano and the other senior monks here, as well as the dedication and support of the lay community. So I think all of you are to congratulate each other for making this place possible. And it's truly, I'd say, one of the jewels of Buddhism here in North America. Okay, I wanted to base my talk this afternoon on a series of verses that occurs in the Dhammapada, in the chapter, the Sahasravagga. That's the chapter on the thousands. And it's a series of verses that I grew very fond of over the years and often recite in my own sort of daily recitation. There are 6 verses, they're numbers 110 to 115 in the Dhammapada, and they all have a similar, each verse has a similar structure, and the basic theme of these 6 verses is what makes a life truly worthwhile. What should be the purpose or aim of our life, particularly as we are following the Buddha's teaching. And you know, in the contemporary world, with the dominance of a kind of materialistic philosophy, the whole emphasis in our sort of society, particularly the medical community, is in extending our lifespan so that we can live as long as possible. You know, now people take it for granted that they can easily live to the age of 80, 85. Quite a number of people get into the 90s, even a few lucky ones, lucky with the question mark after it, make it up into the hundreds, into over 100. And we have all methods to make a longer lifespan possible. Newer medications, and if the medications are not completely successful, then there are various kinds of surgeries that one can undergo. And even when organs start to fail, you know, we've developed techniques for replacing defective organs with more effective organs. So decades ago, there was the first experiments in the heart transplant. Now it's pretty much a routine operation. Then there are liver transplants. Kidney, is there a kidney transplant? There is a kidney transplant. Yeah, with somebody with both failing kidneys, so somebody can donate a kidney and that's transplanted. And I think perhaps the next thing they'll be working on, if they haven't done it yet, is a brain transplant. So I imagine sometime in the distant, maybe not so distant future, we won't need these organic physical bodies anymore, but they'll be able to sort of download a person's entire personality with all of its memories and character traits, maybe even the karmic imprints from previous lives, load it all down onto some kind of compact disc and put it into a completely plastic device modeled to look just like the original person, then upload all of that data, and then one has a lifespan just as long as that indestructible plastic can continue, perhaps until the time the sun explodes and the earth is consumed in fire. Of course, if the longer the lifespan gets extended, then when death does become imminent, the more terrifying it will become. Okay, so one way, one way of looking at the value of life is to extend the lifespan as long as possible. But these verses, these string of 6 verses, give a different perspective on the value of a human life. Okay, the first verse, first I'll recite it in Pali and then give a very literal translation. Yocha vasa satang jive dusilo asamahito ekahang jivitang seyo silavantasa jayino. That is, if someone should live 100 years immoral, without sila, and not without samadhi, a samahito, a life of one day is better for one who is virtuous, who has sila, good behavior, and who is meditative. So this verse is comparing 2 people, one who lives 100 years but of corrupt behavior, no effort to achieve any kind of higher consciousness of samadhi, and somebody who lives, of course, a baby who's just 1 day old is not going to be, naturally has sila, since they're not going to be destroying anything, but they don't have any meditation. So it's not saying that a baby who lives just 1 day and then passes away has a better life than the other person. But the point is that no matter how long we live, if we devote our life to observing the silas, the principles of ethical behavior, and the practice of meditation, our life is better than that life of 100 years with corrupt behavior and without meditation. Okay, and I think we could say that, even for now, just put aside the aspect of meditation, but if one just takes the aspect of sila and compares somebody who lives a virtuous life with somebody who lives a corrupt life, somebody who does it without any hesitation, kills other beings, takes what is not given, engages in sexual misconduct, speaks falsely, indulges in intoxicants. You could see, and then compare that with somebody who lives a life of moral restraint, abiding by, at minimum, the 5 precepts. We could see that the life of one who observes these principles of moral restraint is so much more worthy, so much more valuable, so much more precious, both to that person themselves as well as to the other people in their community and in the world. And if you just reflect, leaving aside the aspect of meditation, you're observing the 5 precepts very, very faithfully and diligently. And when you're coming to the end of your life, you can look back at the course of your life and you can reflect that throughout my life, at least from the time that I reached maturity and undertook the 5 precepts, I didn't inflict harm on any other being. Just reflecting that much, that in my presence, all other living beings were able to feel that their life is secure, that their life is protected, that all other people can feel in my presence that their property is secure, that their possessions are not in danger of being plundered, that their spouses, that there would be no threat to their relationships, to their marital relationships, that people will be confident that the words that I spoke were true, honest, sincere, helpful to create harmony amongst others rather than divisions. So if you reflect back in that way, then that would be a cause just in itself sufficient for giving joy at the end of your life. The sense that my life has made a positive contribution to the people in my family, my community, society, country, even the world. And so just observing the silas is a very powerful positive factor that gives meaning, significance, and makes our life worthy of admiration. But from the perspective of the Buddha's teaching, it's not enough just to observe the silas, but one has to go on in following the path to cultivate the higher mind, the higher consciousness, and that requires some effort in meditation aimed at the attainment of samadhi. So that's why the verse uses the verbal form, jayantassa, one who is practicing jhana, the act of meditation aimed at becoming samahito, one who possesses samadhi. And so in Buddhism, we could say that the Buddha's teaching, it's somewhat like a pharmacy with many different medicines to fit different types of illnesses. So people have different kinds of mental afflictions, mental defilements. So the Buddha teaches many different methods or subjects of meditation intended as the antidotes to these defilements. And so we might say that our daily intake, the regular supply of nutrients that we take in through our regular meals, that might be compared to the practice of something like mindfulness of breathing, using a very, very simple method of meditation that lights up the contents of our mind, since when we're trying to focus on the breath, then all of the different thought formations, desires, inclinations, tendencies, impulses of the mind start coming into awareness. So that is what sort of helps us get acquainted with the workings of our mind, to come to better understand our mind, and to help us learn to quiet down the mind and to gain some degree of concentration. But then other mental afflictions start to intrude upon the mind, and when that happens, then one can resort to some of the other meditation subjects as a way of balancing the mind and clearing away those mental afflictions. For example, some people become prone, when they start to meditate, sort of unconscious or unrecognized states of anger, aggression, ill will, and towards others come into the mind. In that case, one could develop the practice of loving kindness meditation, the metta bhavana. In other people, and this is particularly relevant to monastics, states of sensual desire, sensual lust can arise. In that case, we can take up the meditation on the parts of the body, the 32 parts of the body, seeing how, though we look at the body sort of superficially with our ordinary sight as being beautiful and attractive, but when we start probing and examining into the constituents of the body, taking them one by one, we see that they're not so beautiful and attractive. And then a sort of general, this is like a strong tonic to energize the heedless or lazy mind, is the meditation on death. When we recognize that death is inevitable and we can never be certain when it's going to occur, that will give us a strong motivation for undertaking the practice diligently. I was just reading yesterday that biography of Ajahn Chah, and I was looking ahead into the last chapter, which is discussing his trip to America. And at that time, he was traveling with Paul Brighter, who had in the early days been a monk. And Ajahn Chah was speaking to the American audience at the Insight Meditation Center in Barre, Massachusetts. And he was telling the people, you should practice meditation on death 3 times a day. And Paul Brighter said, why should I do that? I'm still a young man. I'm sure I'm going to live to be, to a ripe old age. I could live to the age of 100. And Ajahn Chah said, that's the way of thinking of a fool. Okay, so we use these different meditation methods as the particular situation requires, aiming to strengthen our concentration, aspiring for the state of samadhi in which the mind becomes focused one-pointedly without distraction on its object. And since the verse mentions here sila and samadhi, or sila and meditation, it's interesting to note that these 2 factors work sort of in tandem to purify each other. Like we might start off with a relatively coarse observance of sila or moral discipline, but as we're attempting to develop meditation, we have to bring into play mindfulness and clear comprehension, which enables us to recognize not only our thought patterns, but also our aspects of the kinds of actions in which we engage. And we also understand our motivations better. And so when we gain that recognition, that helps us to change our motivations and to see where our conduct is defective. And so in this way, the practice of meditation will help to purify sila, or virtue. And then as virtue gets purified, it also helps to strengthen the power of meditation. So sila, you could say, is like the base on which the practice of meditation takes place or unfolds. And in this case, the base supports the practice, and the practice also bends back and purifies the base. Okay, so here in this verse we have the contrast of one of corrupt behavior, immoral behavior, with one of virtuous behavior, and one who is without meditation, and one who practices meditation. Now we come to the second verse. Again, I'll recite in Pali. Yo chivasa satang jive, du panyo asamahito, e kahang jivitang seyo, panyavantasa jayino. So one who lives 100 years, devoid of wisdom and without samadhi, if one lives, it is better to live a single day possessing wisdom and meditating. Okay, so here with this verse, we bring in the third major factor of the threefold training. So we have sila, samadhi, and panya. So here it's contrasting one who lives without wisdom. And so without wisdom means that one doesn't understand what is good, what is bad, what is right, what is wrong. It means that one has a distorted understanding of things, so that one takes, again, like Paul Brider in that story, one thinks that one is going to live a long, long lifespan, and so in that way you think I can behave in any way that I want, and so one can act recklessly, carelessly, without any consideration for others, without any scruples, without any moral scruples. So that all comes from the lack of wisdom. Okay, and that is contrasted with one who has wisdom. And again, the most elementary form of wisdom is the wisdom that could understand the distinction of good and bad, right and wrong, what is unwholesome, what is wholesome, and also understands in relation to that our actions have consequences, and they have consequences for ourselves, that our actions eventually, inevitably, bounce back upon us. The actions create karmic dispositions, and those karmic dispositions remain deposited in the deep strata of the mind, and when they meet with the appropriate conditions, then those dispositions come to maturity and produce their fruits. And so if one acts in unwholesome ways, in harmful ways, in ways that are destructive to the good of others, then those actions will bounce back upon ourselves and bring harm and suffering for ourselves, if not in this life, then in future lives. And so wisdom is understanding at the first stage, first level, it's understanding that principle, that law, first understanding the ethical distinctions and understanding the law of karma that builds upon those ethical distinctions and ensures that all ethically significant actions eventually bounce back upon ourselves. Okay, having wisdom also contributes to the development of meditation, because it's through wisdom that one is able to see into one's own mind and to understand what are the mental factors that are arising in my mind, and then to evaluate those mental factors and to see, are those mental factors contributing to my well-being? Are they contributing to the progress of my practice? Are these mental factors helping to develop samadhi? Or are these mental factors hindrances and obstacles that are preventing the development of samadhi? Okay, so with this wisdom, the initial wisdom, or maybe you call this the second stage wisdom, we're able to understand the workings of our mind better and to know how to train and to discipline our minds in order to promote the development of concentration. And then the third level of wisdom is the wisdom that sees into the real nature of things. This is the wisdom that builds upon samadhi, the wisdom that arises when the mind becomes sufficiently concentrated to see the nature of dharmas, the nature of things, to see them yatha bhutang as they really are. And that means basically to see impermanence, suffering, and non-self. But we're going to come to that a little further as we go through the series of verses. Okay, so we have now the first verse mentions sila and samadhi. The second verse mentions panya and samadhi. So we have here sila, samadhi, panya. Those three constitute, together, they constitute the threefold training of the Buddha's path. But there are still three more verses in this series. Okay, so the next verse says, Yo cha vasa satang jive kusito hina virio ekahang jivitang seyo viryang arabato dalhang. If one should live 100 years lazy and negligent, one who discards or abandons energy, better to live a single day having firmly aroused energy. So here in this verse, the key contrast is between laziness or negligence and virya, which is energy or effort. And energy in the Buddha's training is not just going about any task quickly, brusquely, forcefully, but it's energy in the training of the mind. And particularly the way it's explained in the text, it's energy in overcoming, eliminating, and removing the unwholesome states of mind, and energy in the cultivation, the development of the wholesome qualities, the wholesome states of mind. So the qualities or the mental states that have to be abandoned with energy would be things like the five hindrances: sensual desire, ill will, dullness, restlessness, doubt. And then there are many good qualities that we have to cultivate, that we have to develop. For example, we find mentioned some of these good qualities mentioned in the Mangala Sutta, like reverence, humility, contentment, patience. Other qualities would be loving kindness, compassion, altruistic joy, equanimity, as well as the meditative factors, the more meditative factors like mindfulness, clear comprehension, tranquility, concentration. And so we use energy as a way of removing, overcoming the unwholesome states and developing the wholesome states. And this energy applies particularly in this sequence in the cultivation of meditation. So this is the energy that would be applied to the development of samadhi and panya, wisdom. And so in order to apply energy, one has to apply it skillfully. And to apply energy skillfully, one has to have some understanding of one's own mind. So energy just doesn't work on its own, but energy works together with mindfulness and with clear comprehension. We find this in the Satipatthana Sutta, even where the Buddha says that one dwells contemplating, for example, the body and the body, ardent, clearly comprehending, and mindful. So it's called ardent here. That is specifically the factor of energy. But that energy is working with mindfulness and clear comprehension. So it's with mindfulness, we say that mindfulness is what lights up the mind and shows what is going on in the mind. It's what makes us aware of the mental states that are arising. Because when there's no mindfulness, then the unwholesome states can arise and sort of steal our mind from us. Whereas when there's mindfulness, then those mental states don't get the chance to arise, or if they do arise, then we become aware of them and they run away. I compare this to, it's like in a shop where they have the cameras going, and like the thief comes into a shop, and if there are no cameras, in the corners, he looks up in the corners, no cameras, then the thief can sort of slide down the aisles, look around, no attendants, and then he'll take some of the goods, put them into his pocket, and walk off, and nobody stops him. That's like the unwholesome mental states getting away with our mind, stealing our mind. But if the thief comes into the shop and looks up in the corners, and he sees the cameras are focused on the different aisles, then he'll realize, I'm not going to steal anything in this shop, and he'll walk out. So it's when we have mindfulness focused on the mind, that is lighting up the mind like the camera, so that the unwholesome states, if they're present, they'll leave, and if they're seeking an opportunity to arise, they won't get that opportunity. Okay, and then clear comprehension is what makes us understand those mental states, to understand the states that are harmful and the states that are beneficial. And so then, once we have that understanding, then energy can work with them to eliminate the unwholesome, to cultivate the wholesome. Okay, so this is the way energy works for the development first of samadhi, and then building upon samadhi. It's that energy which powers the contemplation of the real nature of things, in order for insight or wisdom to arise. Okay, that brings us to the next verse, which shows us the specific way in which the wisdom of insight arises. So this verse goes, Yo chevasa satang jive upasang udaya bayang e kahang jivitang seyo pasato udaya bayang. So if one should live 100 years without seeing arising and passing away, it's better to live a single day seeing, perceiving, arising, and passing away. And there's a little funny anecdote based on this verse. Okay, the key expression here is udaya bayang. Udaya means arising, and baya or vaya means falling away, passing away. So after the Buddha's parinibbana, when the Venerable Ananda was an old monk, he was walking by around the monastery, and he heard from one of the kutis a monk chanting this verse, but the monk got that expression wrong. He was reciting not udaya bayang, but udaka bakang, replacing the Y with a K. Now the word udaka means water, and baka is a bird that lives on water, like a crane or a stork. So he was reciting, if one should live 100 years not seeing a water bird, better to live a single day seeing a water bird. Then Ananda heard the monk reciting this, and he went into the kuti and he told the monk, no, not udaka bakang, not water bird, but udaya bayang, arising and passing away. And the monk said, yes, Bhante. Then Ananda walked out of the kuti, but didn't walk away. He stood outside the kuti, and the monk went on, still reciting Udaka Bakang, still reciting better to live better than living 100 years not seeing a water bird is it to live one day seeing a water bird. Then Ananda shook his head and said to himself, the Buddha was right. His teaching is coming to an end. So, you young monks here, if the elders correct you, please accept their advice. Okay, so the expression here, udabayang, arising and passing away, this is sort of the essential introductory stage in the development of insight wisdom. We're now, through the practice of samadhi, to some degree, the mind has become focused, one-pointed, concentrated. So now one directs the mind to start to examine the nature of the body and the mind. And usually this is formulated in the suttas in terms of the 5 aggregates. So it's investigating the arising and passing away of the 5 aggregates. So usually, because the body is the coarsest of the aggregates, one begins with material form, the physical substance of the body, and observes how the body, within the body there are these processes which are always occurring, always changing. This is not just intellectual reflection, but because the mind is now focused, collected, very sensitive, so one could, as one sort of extends the mind through the body, one could feel in the body itself these physical processes constantly occurring, at first at relatively coarse levels, arising, passing away, arising, passing away. And then as the focus on arising and passing away gets more and more intense, then the perception of these processes of arising and passing start increasing in rapidity until it becomes, the whole body dissolves into a whole sequence or stream of just processes of events that are arising and passing, arising and passing. And then the mind, the attention moves on to the mental aggregates, to feeling, perception, the volitional activities, arising, all of them arising and passing, arising and passing. And then it turns to the apparent observer of all of this, the consciousness, and focuses in closely until it sees consciousness itself, the awareness arising and passing away. And so now one is seeing the arising and passing in all of the 5 aggregates. So this is the very clear now perception of impermanence, not just as theory, not just as doctrine, not just as a statement in the text, but the actual anicca sanya, the direct perception of impermanence. And then it's said, both in the suttas and in the commentaries, that as the perception of impermanence increases in intensity, initially we have arising and passing away, but then the attention tends to focus more and more on the aspect of passing away, so that the arising aspect falls into the background, and instead one is observing now phenomena as the texts say, kaya dhamma, vaya dhamma, viraga dhamma, nirodha dhamma, that all of these phenomena are subject to destruction, subject to vanishing, subject to fading away, subject to cessation. And so now one is into a very deep perception of impermanence. And so this is what evolves from the perception of arising and passing away to the perception of passing, fading away, and cessation. The cessation, moment by moment cessation of the 5 aggregates. And now we come to the next verse in the series. Yo cha vasa satang jive apasang amata padang, ekahang jivitang seo, pasato amata padang. So this verse means, although one might live 100 years not seeing the deathless state, living for one day, a life of one day is better for one seeing the deathless state. So here in this verse, the key expression is amata padang. So the word pada has many meanings, but probably the best English rendering is a state. And amata is the deathless, and this is indicating nibbana. And so this verse is indicating what occurs as the arising, the insight into arising and passing away, as it proceeds from that initial insight into impermanence, then it comes into that deep insight into constant breaking up, falling away, vanishing in cessation. Then it's said that when that insight into cessation, this cessation of the five aggregates, when it reaches its peak of intensity, then the mind turns away from all conditioned phenomena, and there sort of opens up a space or a clearing where that appears, which is not conditioned, not arisen, not subject to cessation, and that is nibbana, the deathless. So this is probably, it would indicate the initial breakthrough to the experience or vision or insight into the unconditioned element, into nibbana, that would mark the attainment of stream entry. And so through the progression of insight, there comes that gaining of the eye of the Dhamma. In the suttas, the expression is used, Dhamma bisamaya, the breakthrough to the Dhamma, or sometimes the gaining of the Dhammacakku, the gaining of the eye of Dhamma. And what occurs with that gaining of the eye of the Dhamma, according to both suttas and commentaries, is the direct personal seeing of the unconditioned nibbana. And so that would mark the attainment of stream entry, the first of the four stages of realization, which cuts off the three fetters and sets the person on the path, the irreversible path to liberation. Okay, now comes the sixth verse, the last verse in this series. Yo chavasa satang jive apasang dhammamuttamang ekahang jivitang seo pasato dhammamuttamang. If one should live 100 years not seeing the supreme Dhamma, a life of one day is better for one seeing the supreme Dhamma. So the key expression there is Dhammam Uttamang. And so the question is that in the previous verse it speaks about amata padang, the deathless state, the deathless element, and that is identified with nibbana. So why does the next verse speak about Dhammamuttamang, the supreme Dhamma, as if there was something superior to nibbana? Then I looked up, I was curious about that, and I looked up the commentary to the Dhammapada, and it said that by Dhammamuttamang is meant the 9 world-transcending states. Those are the 4 paths, the path of stream entry, once return and non-return, or arhatship, the corresponding 4 fruits, and nibbana as the unconditioned. But I'm not sure that I would agree with the commentary there, because it seems to me that the previous verse, speaking about seeing the unconditioned, maybe is probably referring to the initial seeing of the unconditioned, which is what takes place with the attainment of stream entry. And so what would lie beyond that is not something higher than Nibbana, but it's the attainment of the final end of the path. So with the seeing of the deathless state, that's the sort of breakthrough and the entry onto the irreversible path. And the last verse is indicating the consummation of the path. So this would be the attainment of arhatship, or the liberation of the mind, the final liberation, or the irreversible liberation of the mind from all defilements. Okay, so looking now at these 6 verses, sort of getting a synoptic view of them, we see that the 6 verses are taking us through a graded series which lays out very beautifully the scheme of the Buddhist spiritual life, starting from the observance of the silas, the practice of meditation aimed at samadhi. In the next verse, we bring in the factor of panya, or wisdom, so that here we have already the threefold training on which we ground our life as followers of the Buddha's teaching. But then to actually put those 3 principles into diligent practice, then we need energy or effort, which comes in the 4th verse. And then as the energy is applied, especially to developing samadhi and panya, then we undertake the development of insight meditation through contemplating the arising and passing away of phenomena. And then when that insight reaches its peak of intensity, then there comes the breakthrough, the initial breakthrough, to the seeing of the deathless state, Nibbana. And then as the practice is pursued still further, then there comes the attainment of the supreme Dhamma, that irreversible liberation of the mind. Okay, so that is the whole scheme of the Buddha, sort of the scheme of the Buddha's path laid out by these 6 verses. But sort of we have to come back to the beginning, to where we find ourselves at present, and looking at these verses, think, what do we have to practice in our own life to give our life this meaning and value and significance? And so at the very outset, we have to start by getting a good grounding in the silas, the moral practices, devoting ourselves to some congenial method of mental cultivation through meditation, gain some understanding of the basic principles of the Buddha's Dhamma, which is the seed of wisdom. And then on that basis, we could apply ourselves energetically and strive to reach the higher stages laid out in the series of verses. Okay, so maybe that will do for my talk this afternoon. So again, I thank you all for your attention and wishing you all progress and joy in following the Buddha's path.
The Vesak Day, also known as Buddha Day, is one of the most important Buddhist festivals. It commemorates the birth, enlightenment, and the final passing away of Gautama Buddha. Followers and also peace lovers around the world celebrated this unique day on the full moon of the month of Vesak, that is usually in the month of May, by visiting temples, offering flowers, lighting lamps, chanting Buddhist discourse, and engaging in good, noble, and wholesome deeds. The Vesak celebration was also held in Canada on May 24th. The event brought together participants from various Buddhist communities representing China, Korea, Hong Kong, Vietnam, Thailand, Sri Lanka, India, Japan, and Canada. It was truly an inclusive occasion attended by people of all faiths. Buddhists from all 3 major traditions came together to participate in this magnificent celebration, which took part in the city of Mississauga, Ontario. Here are some of the many highlights that made the event truly remarkable.
नाथ देवी सुरिंदा बुदु बव पता इंदा ඔබගේ ගුණ කන්දා මෙන්න මම ඔබේ දෙපා වැන්දා දුසිත පුර භවනෙලා වැටලා දෙවිඳු සැනකින් දුන්න පුද පිළිගනිමින් දෙනු මනා සෙත නාද සුනීතුම් नाथ श्री सर्वमंगल्यं यथा देवेन संस्तुतं सुगन्धदीपधूतेन नाथ स्वामिनः
on behalf of Gesar Temple Canada and Lipe Lingyu Canada. Adinnadana Viramani Sikkapadam Samadhiyami Kami Sumitadana Viramani Sikkapadam Samadhiyami Musavada Viramani Sikkapadam Samadhiyami Surameraya Majjapamadathanam Viramani Sikkapadam Samadhiyami Sabbapapasa Akharanam Kusulasa Upasampada Sachita Pariyadavanam Edam Buddhana Sasanam Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you.
The Dharma talk today is by Ajahn Karuna Dhammo. Ajahn Karuna Dhammo is from the Abhayagiri Buddhist Monastery, which is a Thai forest tradition monastery of Theravada Buddhism in the tradition of Ajahn Chah. With traditional monastic practice as its foundation, Abhayagiri Monastery provides an opportunity for the Sangha of monks, men, and women to live in the forest, dwelling life of simplicity, meditation, and self-discipline, thereby supporting all to fully enter upon the Dharma, the Buddha's path to enlightenment. We are grateful to the Venerable for sharing with us the Dharma titled Transcending Buddha's Life into our own practice.
Vaisakha Puja, here we are, full moon of May. We just had a double ordination last night, Anagarika ordination and a Samanera ordination. So it's a kind of a double-header weekend. Give a few reflections tonight just to cap off this very beautiful, long, significant weekend here at Abhayagiri. It's also Vaisakha Puja is the day that I took my ordination, my full bhikkhu ordination 27 years ago here at Abhayagiri. So it's a special day for me too, my birthday in a sense. And just nice to have others going forth on this same day, and it being such a auspicious day in the Buddhist list of holy days, one of 3 major observance days in the typical Buddhist calendar: Vaisakha Puja, Asala Puja, and Magha Puja. Thank you. I can plead that I'm functioning on not quite a full set of equipment here. I just had surgery a couple of weeks ago and am in phases of recovery. So if this comes out in bits and pieces, please excuse me. But Ajahn Janako asked if I'd give a few reflections tonight, and I'm happy to do that for better or for worse. But Vaisakha Puja is a particularly special observance day for us, commemorating, as I'm sure everybody here knows, the birth, enlightenment, and passing away, death of the Buddha, our teacher. And as the tradition goes, that his birth into this world, his last existence as a human being, the night of his enlightenment, and the passing away of his body this lifetime all happened on this full moon of May. So we come together. It's probably of the 3, it's the most widely acknowledged and observed throughout all of the Buddhist traditions in one form or another, because of its significance. The impact that the Buddha had on the world is incomparable, from at least those of us who follow this path and have realized the benefits of his training, his teaching. It's quite a miracle, actually, that someone came into the world having put forth so many eons of preparation for being able to really fully realize on his own the realization of complete ending of suffering, and was able to establish a dispensation for all of us to gain benefit from that more than 2,500, almost 2,600 years later. So we use these kinds of days, particularly this day, as one to reestablish a sense of faith, of commitment, confidence in the path. Traditionally, when we talk about recollections from this day, we can attain a sense of faith and confidence just by reflecting on the Buddha's life, his birth. There's the traditional accounting of the miracles that occurred that accompanied his birth, all the various celestial beings attending the birth, realizing that a very special being was coming into the human realm again, and that all going well, he would develop his path on this last lifetime and realize perfect enlightenment. So there was many what we would consider miracles happening in terms of the birth process and his taking his first steps as the Bodhisattva. And all these birth miracles, recounting this, were once the subject of a group of monks who had come together and were reminiscing, recounting the wonderful and marvelous qualities of the Buddha. And they were going through these lists of many wonderful and marvelous qualities, and including many of these birth miracles. And as they were enjoying that talk and recollecting that and finding an inspiration and uplift in that discussion, the Buddha came upon them and asked what they were talking about. And they mentioned the subject of their conversation. And the Buddha said, yes, those are all wonderful and marvelous qualities of the Tathagata, the Buddha. And he says, but there's one more wonderful and marvelous quality that you haven't mentioned. And his answer was, he says, and that wonderful and marvelous quality is that the Tathagata, the Buddha, knows a feeling as it arises, as it persists, and as it passes away. The Tathagata knows a perception as it arises, persists, and passes away. The Tathagata knows a thought as it arises, persists, and passes away. This is another wonderful and marvelous quality of the Tathagata. So I always like to remember that story because the Buddha was always one to bring it back down to a very cogent, practical application. It wasn't that he was trying to discount the joy and uplift that people experienced remembering some of these other qualities, birth qualities, but he always pulled it back down to something that was quintessential to his teaching. And in fact, in other places in the canon, those same three qualities that he was described as wonderful and marvelous were his basic definition, or part of one of his definitions of sampajanya, clear knowing, clear understanding, the arising and passing of feelings, perceptions, and thoughts, and that the fact that anyone can start to contemplate that and realize that and experience that understanding for themselves. So that's oftentimes the recollection of the birth into this world, into this existence of the Buddha, a supreme teacher for all of us. And we can recollect that and appreciate that and experience just a lot of uplift and gratitude. This dispensation, this teaching was brought into the world for us to benefit from, as I say, almost 2,600 years later in many of the teachings in their original forms. The second aspect of this day, the enlightenment of the Buddha, we can recollect the night of his enlightenment and gain inspiration from that. As it's often described, the enlightenment came in 3 stages. That night when the Buddha, after having been on the path, searching on his own, sometimes with teachers, sometimes more on his own, but in the very end, having realized as far as he could go from some of his teachers, some of the sublime meditation states, but realizing that he hadn't penetrated to full and complete ending of dukkha, ending of suffering, and went off on his own, made the determination on the night of his enlightenment, the full moon of May, after being practicing on his own for 6 years, now at the age of 35, he made the resolution to sit under the Bodhi tree, that he would not move until he had penetrated to full and complete understanding of the Dhamma. He must have had, in my imagination, he must have had a pretty good sense that he was on the cusp after having pursued many different practices and ideas for 6 years, and then gone off on his own, realizing that he had to finish the work on his own. But to make that kind of resolution not to move, he must have had some sense that I think that he had the capability, the potential for doing that, and just needed to basically make that final commitment, that drive, that determination to make that full realization. So he made that determination, and then as the story goes, there were 3 watches of the night. And in that first watch of the night, he examined his own personal history, what we might call his narrative, his personal narrative, because he had really perfected many of the meditation aspects, and his ability to see into past lives was quite comprehensive. Some of the details of that particular content of the night are a bit sketchy, or they're just not very complete, but I have a sense that maybe he just realized this sense of dis-ease, this sense of dukkha, and was looking for some understanding of how does this all come to be? How did this all come to happen? This suffering that he experiences in his existence, this basic unsatisfactoriness of human life, of even having the best of everything in his life as a prince, and all the sensual gratifications that could be had in the human realm. How, where does the source of unsettledness, of dissatisfaction come from? And with his ability to see into his innumerable past lives, I think he, as the story goes anyway, he just reviewed as far back as he could possibly go, eons and eons of existence, of many past lives and different states of being, just examining, seeing his own trajectory. And he was never able to find a discoverable beginning to this. That's the way that it's phrased in the suttas sometimes, from an undiscoverable beginning, beings and the Buddha himself wandering through samsara, obstructed by ignorance and hindered by craving, fettered by craving. Undiscoverable beginning. And he was able to go back eons and eons and eons of time and never find an origin. So I can imagine just myself, that kind of sense of, wow, I've been doing this over and over and over again, the same thing over and over and over again, relentlessly, and sometimes in very exalted states of being, sometimes in very low states of being, and always experiencing the transience, the undependability of living in being, existing through any different realm. So, the sense of awe of the nature of his trajectory, as far back as he could go, a very strong, must have been an incredible emotional realization. And then the second watch of the night, after he had completed, as far as he could, reviewing his own personal narrative, the kind of expanding that same examination to the arising and passing of all beings through different planes of existence, being able to see the arising and passing of beings in different planes according to their karma. This is where he really fully understood and experienced directly the law of karma, that all beings, as well as including himself, but all other beings too, were experiencing the fruits of intentional activity. That is the law of karma, where we have this quality of intention that drives us from one existence to another, creating the causes and conditions for better or for worse, for our rebirth into the next realm, one after another after another. So the law of karma became very clear to him then, as well as the cycles, the continuing cycles of birth and death that relentlessly passed on for all beings. Adding to that impact, I think, of his realization of the noble truth of dukkha, really seeing that firsthand and penetrating that very deeply, noble truth of dukkha, and its cause, the fact that he was starting to understand this deeply, this cause of this law of karma, basically the second noble truth, that all dukkha, all dissatisfaction is caused by one of the three forms of craving: craving for sensuality, craving for existence, bhavatanha, and craving for annihilation. So that's the second watch of his night. And you can tell, I mean, these were based on his meditative powers, but the impact, the actual story is one of this incredible sense of motivation based on a deep penetration of the truth of dukkha. And then, of course, the final watch of the night, on the night of his enlightenment, where he was able to see fully, experience deeply how to relinquish the causes of dukkha, that very craving. I can only imagine that the impact, the effect on his heart of having seen how all of this suffering comes into existence, the causes and conditions leading to it, and the repetition, the relentlessness of it, gave rise to this sense of disenchantment. He'd seen through the illusion of the realm of the senses, the illusion of this craving to be, this craving to exist in the ways that we think of that. He became disenchanted. The enchantment was removed, leading to this very strong sense of dispassion for the ways of the world. Through clear knowing and seeing, jnana dasana, he was able to penetrate deeply the transience of the world and what it offered, the transience of this drive to always seek fresh delight in existence, and realized that it was never ending. And he was able to relinquish, to let go of that particular drive and open up to what we call the unconditioned. The ending of the asavas was this third stage of enlightenment, or third stage on the night of enlightenment, the third watch. The ending of the outflows of movement towards sensuality, towards the outflow towards becoming, just pure becoming energy, being, existence, and the outflow of ignorance, not seeing clearly the arising and passing of all conditioned phenomena. All of those were ended. The ending of the asavas happened in that third watch, and he fully penetrated and realized that he had been following and completed the Eightfold Path, all the aspects of the Eightfold Path, to the full, not just the mundane realization of the Four Noble Truths, but the transcendent realization, where he fully and deeply saw the cause of dukkha, dukkha, the cause of dukkha, the path leading to the ending of it, and fully realizing the ending of dukkha. So this is typically what we can contemplate on Vaisakha Puja, this aspect of his birth, his enlightenment, and then his passing away, and realizing that I think the inspiring thing to me in the story of his passing away is more the recollection that the Buddha was a human being too. He wasn't a god. He wasn't anything that he, claimed was a, superior form of any particular kind of celestial attainment or a supreme perfect God. He was a human being, and all human beings pass away at some point. And the thing that, to me, that's inspiring about that is that is a statement that we're all in this same condition. We all have the same potential. Maybe we don't have the eons of parami, of perfections, to become a fully enlightened Buddha, and we don't need to, thankfully, because we've got the Buddha's dispensation that marks a clear trajectory for us if we decide to take up the path. But because we are human beings, just as the Buddha was a human being, with flesh and blood body and a mind that followed certain patterns, but had the same potential, the same capability of understanding the path and fully realizing that, and that we have that capability in this very lifetime. It's not easy, but the Buddha basically was there demonstrating through his humanity, his being just a human being, a perfected human being, but in that human form, and that this is the most auspicious form of birth for us to be able to follow that path that the Buddha laid out. So these are some of the traditional reflections that we can engage in and find inspiration from on this day of Vesaka Puja, the Buddha's birth, enlightenment, and passing away. There's also, I think, on a more day-to-day level that I think that we can apply this reflection to, and that is on a more symbolic level, perhaps, the quality of birth, and that, sometimes we think of as birth as dukkha, which it is in a literal sense, but there's also the potential for bringing into being many, many special qualities that we need to develop along the path. We've been talking a lot, Ajahn Yanako has been really emphasizing the importance of the development of virtue and gratitude and many of the qualities, the paramis, similar along the lines of what the Buddha developed over many eons, that we also work towards developing, giving birth, in a sense, to the qualities of generosity, of kindness, the reflections on gratitude and the wish to repay that, the qualities of loving kindness, the qualities of discernment, the qualities of patience, all the different qualities that we need to bring into being as part of our mind training, as part of our heart training on this path. So this is, in a sense, one of the positive aspects of becoming. We can't completely relinquish and let go and dissolve into nibbana before we really develop a full set of foundational qualities. So it's what Ajahn Jeff refers to as the paradox of becoming, to let go of the full rebirth urge to exist, that final relinquishment of all forms of becoming. We actually have to engage in a lot of becoming along skillful lines to make that possible. We can't just do it through the wish to not exist anymore. So birth, we can celebrate the fact that we can bring into being, we can bring into birth all of these skillful, supportive qualities that not only prepare us for the final relinquishment, if we take the path so far, or at least have some experience, taste of it, but also delight in the qualities in and of themselves as we develop them. They feel good. It naturally feels good to be generous, to act kindly, to follow moral precepts, to not harm other beings in any way, to be straightforward and honest. These are actually qualities that feel good right here and now, as well as serve as a basis for our development of the path. The qualities that the Buddha realized and understood on the night of his enlightenment, I think we can also work towards realizing the root causes of our own suffering, even if we can't see our multiple past lives, or we can't see the rebirth and appearance and disappearance of beings according to their karma. I would suspect that most of us, if not all of us, don't have that ability. We can reflect right here and now on the dukkha in our own lives and use that as our motivation. We can experience the truth of how our wanting, our craving for sensuality, our craving for existence, our craving for just any kind of experience to quell the boredom, to quell the different moods that we feel, the different waves of irritation and anger and confusion and anxiety and fear. This is our direct experience of dukkha. And for us to be able to take the time, take the opportunity to own up to that, to really look at that. This is our first and second watch of the night, in a sense, and to see that we're not alone. That's maybe our second watch of the night, is seeing that we're not alone. Other people are experiencing these difficulties as well. and that we have a collective ability to help each other and work with each other to understand it and to, again, own up to it and to look at it honestly and without fear, and to say, okay, well, I've suffered, haven't I suffered long enough? Haven't I done this long enough? Isn't there another way, something that will bring me a longer sense of contentment, longer lasting sense of contentment? And then to be willing to walk that path, to open up to some difficult mind states, to see where it is, that we keep on making the same errors over and over again, and to be willing to realize and acknowledge that we can't do it on our own, that we need the help of the other beings around us to do that too. We may think that we should be able to do it on our own, and we have our opinions and our views about the path and our certainty maybe about the way that we're approaching it. But unless we're really open to the feedback and the presence of other people who are also walking the path, it's very likely that we'll just get caught in our own delusions. So the first watch of our night, symbolically, is realizing and understanding the enormity of our dukkha and the fact that there's causes and conditions for that, and the realization that other people are in the same boat and that we just need to jump in and help each other to understand that. And that the final watch of our night on a daily basis is that really taking to heart the importance of letting go, of relinquishment, and realizing that the ways that we've generally been seeing the world, understanding the world, are what we need to work towards letting go of, so that we can open up to a greater truth, a greater sense of freedom, one that's long-lasting. And then symbolically, maybe on a more personal level, the death. What is the death we talk about the death of the Buddha, the parinibbana, the final passing of his body, of his khanda's body and mind into parinibbana. And really what we're talking about is the death of dukkha, nirodha, cessation, dukkha, nirodha, the cessation of dukkha. And that our enlightenment, our birth into good qualities, skillful qualities, our relinquishment of the unskillful qualities that keep us bound in samsara, all lead to this dukkha nirodha, in remembering Sariputta's inspired utterance of Nibbana is the cessation of dukkha. Nibbana is the dukkha nirodha, essentially. The cessation of becoming. And that all forms of wanting to have sensual pleasures, all forms of wanting to just be existent, and even subtle forms of wanting to annihilate and get rid of all the unpleasant. Nibbana is the cessation of that particular force, the cessation of becoming especially. So death, a sense, the death of dukkha, is what we can recollect as the potential for our practice. The Buddha really encouraged us to take it as far as we can go. He didn't say, stop at just a minimal amount of stress reduction or doing a few good things to help people. All of these are part of the path, but we've been exposed to the teachings. We have the potential for full and complete realization. And as we've been admonished by many of our teachers, don't settle for mere happiness. There is a potential here for complete happiness. And if we just recollect and use the traditional recollections from the night of the Buddha's enlightenment, from the events of his birth, the potentials that he brought into the world for all of us, and the fact that he was a human being, just like we are, to give us that inspiration that we too can follow a path to the complete ending of dukkha. So that's what I think of the night of enlightenment, Visakha Puja, all these qualities that come forth that we can recollect to serve as an inspiration to keep on the path. So I'll leave it there for a few reflections tonight.
That concludes today's program. If you have any questions about the contents of our broadcast, please feel free to reach out to us at info@buddhadharmatv.com. Our dedicated team remains committed to sharing the profound teachings of the Buddha, helping you walk the path of wisdom and enlightenment. Thank you for joining us. We look forward to seeing you again tomorrow at the same time. Namo Buddhaya.